This summer, I decided to roam around Colorado for a few days. I've had a lot of things on my list for this state that I've just never been able to do. While I feel like I will always have stuff to do in this beautiful state, this summer was a perfect time to knock a few of them off my list. Starting off my trip, I took a scenic drive up CO9 to Hoosier Pass. Along Highway 9, I stopped at Hoosier Pass. At 11,542 feet, this alpine pass has views for miles and has access to some great trails. Although it was still early in the season, there was still a lot of snow. I did check out a bit of one of the trails there. I watched the sun rise over the mountains, snapped some pictures, and then continued on my way. My next stop was an overlook in the nearby town of Breckenridge. To save some adventure for you, I'll keep the name redacted. It's a 1 mile loop with stunning views of a lake below and mountains in all directions. This was a great time to also stop, stretch, and get some coffee. While Hoosier Pass was a great stop, the first major one of the journey was Rifle Falls State Park. This park really amazed me. While it's a very small and hidden treasure just about 3 hours away from Denver, it's only 20 minutes outside of Rifle, Colorado. This park is a bit difficult to get to from the largest airport in Colorado, but it could be worth the drive if you're really into waterfalls. The long drive is very rewarding as I-70 cuts through the various canyons in northern Colorado. Upon arriving, you will find two parking lots. You can go ahead and go to the one that's a little bit closer to the falls. This makes it only about a 5-minute walk to see the falls, and that's a maybe. It was probably shorter, but it's been a while since I was there. You can then follow a trail behind the falls and explore the caves hidden around its base. You will then find multiple viewpoints both at the base of the falls and up above. While the park does not have much else in terms of attractions, the Triple Fall is well worth checking out. The best way to describe it is a tropical oasis in northern Colorado. Nearby you will also find Harvey Gap and Rifle Gap state parks. While I didn't have time to check them out, they both looked very interesting. After spending a couple of hours at Rifle Falls, I took off to Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park. When I went to Black Canyon, they had the main road at the south rim down to just one lane. With that in mind, I probably spent an extra hour just waiting my turn to go and drive through certain parts of the park. Hopefully when you go, they'll have the road fully back open. Upon getting to the visitor center, I walked the short trail to the first viewpoint. I'll be honest, it was absolutely terrifying. As someone with a fear of heights, looking down at the nearly 2,000-foot sheer drop, I was astonished. The first view at Black Canyon was one of my favorites, and it was very similar to when I saw the Grand Canyon for the first time. It absolutely took my breath away. Along the main road, there were multiple short hikes and viewpoints to check out. I stopped and did pretty much all of them except for the route that takes you to the bottom of the canyon itself. Each viewpoint was magnificent, but the Warner Point viewpoint was my favorite. While it is the most difficult to access, it's about an hour hike round trip. It's very worth it though. While Black Canyon was not my favorite national park I've ever visited, it is still a work of wonder. The vertigo I felt standing next to the edge and seeing the Gunnison River down below still haunts me in a good way. This park can be seen in half a day, but if you want to see the north and south rim, plan at least a full day, because the two are a pretty good drive. With my time at Black Canyon wrapped up, I headed down towards Telluride. I was going to camp near a ghost town, but I ended up chickening out on the road to it, and I ended up bailing. Instead, I opted to camp next to an alpine lake, and it was so worth it. The next morning, I woke up and I was greeted with these views. After a rejuvenating breakfast here, I made my way down to the Canyon of the Ancients Visitor Center. Canyon of the Ancients is a pretty big national monument and has a lot of unique ancestral Puebloan sites to check out and see. While I only had time to stop at the visitor center and check out the site there, it was well worth the detour. It was a great stop before I actually entered Mesa Verde. I don't have much else to say besides go check it out. They have a really informational video that talks about what life in the American Southwest was like for these people. It's some rich history and it's in a very beautiful area. Before I dive into what I did at Mesa Verde, I want to say that Mesa Verde is my favorite national park with history as its focus. This park is so rich in history and archaeology. For Mesa Verde, I spent 2 days and I feel like I saw so much of the park. If I ever find myself in the area again, I definitely would go back as there were still a few things I did miss. I also want to add that you need to make sure you do your research on this park as lodgings, tours, and closures can be a bit difficult to navigate. While in the park, I stopped at pretty much every scenic and historic overlook. The views of the Main Coast Valley below were incredible and really put into perspective how unique Mesa Verde is as a national park. In addition, at one of the other viewpoints, I was able to see all the way to Shiprock, New Mexico, and Bears Ears in Utah. The park itself has a pretty easy to follow road system, as much of it's just a 2-lane road with a small one-way loop here and there. For my first day, I spent most of the time seeing the easy to see sights and doing the non tour hikes. Originally, I planned on day 1 to be spent in the Weatherill Mesa, but it was closed when I went. Along the main drive, you pass the Mesa Verde Visitor and Research Center, a large amount of overlooks, and just a ton of different sites. I will say the easiest way to make sure you see everything is just to follow the signs. For day 1, I pretty much treated my map like a checklist and just crossed stuff off as I did it. A lot of the park does not require hiking to enjoy, which is nice. Many of the smaller sites even have paved walkways, which makes it very accessible. My favorite thing from day 1 was the Petroglyph Point Trail. From what I had read online, this seemed to be considered the most difficult hike in the park, and while I can't verify as I didn't do a few of the hikes, the hike treats you with walking right by some smaller sites, petroglyphs, and some fun terrain. While it can be a bit intimidating along this hike because you are right at the edge of a canyon, I did not feel that I was unsafe at any point. The big part of this hike that is challenging is near the end where you need to scramble back up to the top of the mesa. Compared to other scrambles I've done, this was pretty easy. This hike had so many unique things that I've never seen on any other hike, and it was so different from the rest of the ones in the park, which is why I really recommend it. After staying at the awesome Moorfield campground, I woke up to the clearest, most incredible night sky I've ever seen. I'm not an astrophotographer by any means, so this is as good as I could get. For day 2, I had a tour of Cliff Palace purchase, which was super exciting. I remember seeing a photo of it in a history textbook from my elementary school, so to finally see it in real life was something I could cross off my bucket list. My tour was not until 2 p.m., so I had plenty of time to re-explore the park. I essentially went through all the easy to access sites again, spent some time at the museum in Spruce Canyon, ate lunch at the Farview Terrace, and then when it was finally time for my tour, I went. I want to stress that I highly recommend this tour, but there are some things I wish I knew beforehand. The tour of Cliff Palace starts off with a pretty easy descent down into the canyon below. Although there are some parts that are a bit steep, most of the people that was in the tour group didn't complain. Upon getting to the bottom, the ranger talked to us for about 15 minutes, then we inched closer towards the Cliff Palace itself. It was incredible being so close and seeing the artisanship of these dwellings. The ranger was very informative, but the very next thing I knew, we were told to head back up. The way back up consisted of 3 ladders, and it wasn't really that difficult. So, overall, it's worth the money. It's really cool to see. They do advertise it as a 45-minute tour, but that does include the safety briefing, the climb down, the introductory talk, the climb back up, and really only about 10 to 15 minutes you're actually at Cliff Palace. It was an awesome once-in-a-lifetime experience, but sadly you don't really get to explore any of it, nor do you get much time there. After my tour at Cliff Palace, I began to take off, signaling the end of my summer trip. Before I wrap up, I want to mention that Mesa Verde is a well-preserved archaeological place. There are no backcountry trails for backpacking, and you must stay on the trail. So please make sure to stay on the trail because not only can it disrupt other sites in the region that aren't marked on the maps, it also results in a hefty fee for you. Mesa Verde has over 5,000 sites, and as time goes on, maybe more will be available to the public to see, but as of right now, please just enjoy the park as it is. Now for some honorable mentions. While these were not places I went to on my road trip, I went shortly after, and they absolutely blew my mind. First up was Pikes Peak. Every time I've summited Pikes, whether by car, train, or my own 2 feet, I've been astonished with just how far above everything you are. I think if more people could stand on top of a 14,000 foot tall mountain, maybe the petty differences in humanity wouldn't become so drastic. My wife, my mother-in-law, and I took the train up this June, and it was an awesome experience. We also went and checked out the Royal Gorge area, which was super incredible. While this one video only showcases a few small pieces of this beautiful state, I'm fortunate to explore it so often. I love Colorado, and there's so many reasons why it's my favorite state. The next video will have us visit the West Coast, and it'll probably be pretty short, but I still want to share. Until next time, have a good one.